Peace. This is Wise Words Media back at y'all for another round. And Tszyu, man, what a disappointment. So earlier this week, we got word that Terence Crawford had activated his mandatory position as the WBO number one contender. So with that being said, it meant this Saturday's fight between Tszyu and Sebastian Fundora was going to not only be a title fight, but this fight was going to see who would be Terence Crawford's first opponent at the 154-pound division. And because Tszyu is the favorite going into this fight, all roads were pointing to Terence Crawford versus Tszyu in a fight that would be like, this is one boxer puncher versus another puncher. Like, this was going to be, somebody was going to go out that night. Somebody was going to get knocked down. Guaranteed at least one knockdown that fight, because Terence Crawford, even though he's moving up in weight, we've seen him move up in weight and not shy. He goes straight at opponents. And Tszyu is the seek and destroy type that goes straight at opponents. So this would have made for a great fight. Unfortunately, Tszyu's manager stated that Tszyu will be vacating his WBO title. And by vacating the title, that means no Terence Crawford versus Tszyu fight. That's highly disappointing, because Tszyu was a guy, or is a guy, that talks a lot. In his humble little way, he talks a lot. What's my mother name? And so he's making his claim that he's the best 154-pound fighter, and that this is his division, and it's his time, the Tszyu era, and that we got to get familiar with his name. What better way to get familiar with his name than for him to fight the number one guy in the sport today, the number one pound-for-pound fighter in Terence Crawford. You beat Crawford, you're automatically king of the hill. But unfortunately, Tszyu doesn't seem to have that in his immediate plans, as he vacates the title right after Terence Crawford states that he was going to activate his mandatory and fight the winner of the upcoming main event between Tszyu and Fundora. Now you have certain boxing pages and people making excuses, talking about, oh, well, he's fighting Errol Spence. Well, Errol Spence doesn't seem like he's going to be fighting anytime soon. He's still recovering from the eye injury. So I don't think going into a fight, coming back from surgery, and your first fight is going to be against a bigger boxer puncher in Tszyu. I don't see that happening. I really don't see that happen. I think they're gonna give Errol Spence somewhat of a tune-up fight before he goes in. He's not gonna go against one of the top two guys in the division. So yeah, this is highly disappointing. It seems and it reeks of Tszyu not wanting to fight Terence Crawford, because it seems like all this time he never vacated the belt. And it seems like as soon as Crawford activated his mandatory to put himself in position to fight Tszyu, suddenly Tszyu vacates the belt even before fight night, even before this Saturday. Very bizarre. Just shows you that Terence Crawford, is this guy the most feared boxer of all time? I grew up during the Tyson era, and I've seen people, talk about Tyson and the kind of aura that Tyson had. But this is different, man, because still, at least with Tyson, you still had guys like Evander Holyfield that he knew. He just felt it in his heart that he could beat Mike Tyson. Flew all the way to Japan to see Buster Douglas versus Mike Tyson and to try to line things up to get that fight to be next. But unfortunately, Buster Douglas pulls the big upset, and that fight ends up getting postponed. But Holyfield had that belief that he could beat Tyson. He wasn't scared of Tyson. Crawford, there's nobody that seems to want to fight Terence Crawford. Nobody. I mean, you got even Canelo Alvarez who says, well, and this is credit to Andre Ward for this point. Excellent point. You got Canelo Alvarez who said, oh, if I beat Crawford, he was too small. But yo, dude, your last fight, you just fought Jermell Charlo, who was too small too. Jermell Charlo is just slightly bigger than Terence Crawford. So they're about the same size, but now you don't want the Crawford fight, and you had no problem fighting a smaller Josecito Lopez. You had no problems fighting a smaller Amir Khan, but somebody, and even a way smaller Floyd Mayweather, who barely reached 147 pounds. Barely. He was barely at 147. He was walking around at 147. So the dude, Terence Crawford seems to have this aura about him that fighters don't want to fight him. Errol Spence did not want to fight him. That's why when you could go look it up right now, that now famous confrontation that they had backstage at one of the fights, man, Terence Crawford was in his grill, was like, yo, why you ain't pick up my phone call? And he's like, your phone call? I don't even have your number. And he's like, yo, and he's pressing Errol Spence, and Errol Spence was like, oh, you too light in the ASS. And Crawford was like, hey, nobody said Floyd Mayweather was light in the ASS. Like, why are you giving Crawford an excuse saying you smaller? Same thing like Canelo, you're smaller. And I'll be the first to say I don't want to see a Canelo Crawford fight, but Canelo is contradicting himself because he just fought a guy that was far smaller than him. But when it comes to Crawford, it doesn't seem like he wants that. And it just seems like so many fighters just avoid it. Now Tszyu is the latest in this list of fighters that just do not want to fight Terence Bud Crawford. I'm starting to believe he's the most avoided and the most respected fighter of all time. Because you seeing nobody, even at the age 30, I think Bud is like, 35 or something like that? Nobody wants to fight him. Nobody's calling him out. So yeah, man, disappointing news. Let's see what happens this Saturday. If Fundora wins, maybe Fundora and Terence Crawford meet up, and that will be an interesting style clash. So I'm Wise for Wise Words Media. Peace.